Hi. I'm going to tell you guys some stories. I'm your Uncle Kent. And this is the fall of 1994. This is Boaz. He's our dog. And I'm making this tape for you guys for Christmas. And I hope you enjoy some of the stories. This first story is called Bubble Trouble. Once upon a time in a kingdom not so very far away, not so very long ago, there floated in a bubble. It was a big bubble. It was bigger than a horse, so much, much bigger than a horse. And it floated down, and the children saw it first, because children always see bubbles first. And then when got their mothers and their fathers and said, "Oh, look, it's a bubble." And they stood around the bubble, and they marveled at the bubble. And they danced around the bubble, singing, "It's a bubble, it's a bubble, it's a great big bubble, it's a bubble, it's a bubble, it's a great big bubble." And everybody who saw the bubble was happy, except the king. And the king was a lean, mean man with a long, sharp, pointed nose. And he walked out of his castle and he said, "It's not a bubble, it's trouble." "Your Highness, it's very funny, but it's a bubble." "No, it's trouble, and I'll show you that it's trouble." And he reached to the side, he pulled out a long, thin dagger. And he raised his hand toward the sky, and the people gasped. And the king struck the bubble, and suddenly there was trouble in the bubble. For the king was now in the bubble, and you can't rule the kingdom from a bubble. Trouble, trouble, trouble. "Get me out of this trouble," the king cried, but the people did not know how to get the king out of trouble. And the king snarled a sneerly smile, and he said, "Go get my 3 knights. They'll do anything for me." So the people went and fetched the king's 3 knights, and the king said to the first knight, "Get me out of this trouble." And the first knight was the Black Knight. He had a black suit of armor and rode a magnificent stallion and had a long, sharp, pointed lance. And he started to ride toward the king in the bubble, but then he thought, what if, when I pierce the bubble, I also pierce the king? Then we'll have trouble in the bubble. And the king went, "Ay!" So the Black Knight rode, and he struck the bubble. But his lance bounced high in the sky, and then there was trouble in the bubble. For the king was still in the bubble, and you can't rule a king from a bubble. Trouble, trouble, trouble. So the king called the second knight, "Get me out of this trouble." And the second knight was the Green Knight. He was green all over, even his hair, even his eyes, even his teeth were green. But you didn't notice anything about the Green Knight except his long, sharp, 2-edged sword, which was so sharp that it could cut the wind and make it bleed. And he strode up toward the king in the bubble. And he raised his hand toward the sky, and he thought, what if, when I slice the bubble, I also slice the king? Then we'll have trouble in the bubble. And the king went, "Ay!" So the Green Knight took his sword and he struck the bubble. But his sword bounced high in the sky, and then there was trouble in the bubble. For the king was still in the bubble, and you can't rule a king from a bubble. Trouble, trouble, trouble. So the king called his third knight, and people cheered. For the third knight was the Red Knight. And the Red Knight had never been beaten in battle. And he carried a chain of gold that he would swing over his head. And with that chain, he had defeated armies of tens and hundreds and thousands. And he strode up toward the king in the bubble. And he started to swing his mighty chain, but they thought, what if, when I smash the bubble, I also smash the king? Then we'll have trouble in the bubble. And the king looked at the Red Knight. And he went, "Hey!" So the Red Knight took his mighty chain and he struck the bubble. But his chain bounced high in the sky, and then there was trouble in the bubble. For the king was still in the bubble, and you can't rule a kingdom from a bubble. Trouble, trouble, trouble. Then the people all turned and looked up the hill, for they heard a small cry. And a little girl came running down the hill, saying, "Father, look, it's a bubble."
"No, my darling, it's not a bubble, it's trouble."
"No, Father, look, it's a bubble."
"No, my darling, the king says it's trouble, therefore it's trouble."
"Father, look, it's a bubble. And if you treat it like a bubble, it'll act like a bubble." And the little girl reached down with her thumb and her forefinger, and all the people held their breath. And she gently pinched the bubble. And the bubble popped. And the king was free. And that's the story of the bubble. It wasn't trouble, it was merely only a bubble. Now the second story is a classic. It's written a long time ago. And it's one that your grandpa Jake would be very proud that I know, because we had to do this in English class. It's called The Jabberwocky. "'Twas brillig in the slithy toes to gar and gibble in the web, while mimsy were the burrow grows and the mome grass outgrave. Beware the jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the jub-jub bird, and shun the from the expander snatch. He took his vorpal sword in hand, long time the maxim foe he sought. Then rested he by a tum-tum tree, and stood a while in thought. And as in oafish thought he stood, the jabberwock with eyes aflame came wiggling through the tugly wood and burbled as it came. 1, 2, 1, 2, and through. His vorpal sword went snicker snack. And with it dead, he took its head and went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Oh, come to my arms, my beamish boy. Oh, frumpious day, Callooh Calais, he chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig in the slithy coves, to gyre and gimble in the wave. On mimsy were the burrow groves, and the mome rats outgrave. Now this next story comes from Alaska. And I had the good fortune of being able to work up there one summer where I learned this story. It was written by a man named Robert Service, who also worked a few summers up in Alaska during the Yukon Gold Rush. And he wrote a lot about the miners and the folks coming up for the gold. And this is a story of one of those folks. And it's appropriate with a fire right next to me to tell you the story of the cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails got their secret tales that'd make your blood run cold. The northern lights, they've seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge at Lake LaBarge when I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee where the cotton blooms and glows, and why he left his home in the south to roam around the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but that land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell. Though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way over the Dawson Trail. Oh, talk of your cold through the parka's fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd close and the lashes froze, still sometimes we couldn't see. It wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed and the stars overhead were dancing, heel to toe, he turned to me and, "Cap," says he, "I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking that you don't refuse my last request." Well, he seemed so low that I couldn't say no, and he said with a sort of moan, "It's a cursed cold, and it's got right hold till I've chilled clean through to the bone. Yet 'tain't being dead. Awful dread, the icy grave that pains. So I want you to swear that foul or fair you'll cremate my last remains." Well, pal's last need is a thing to heed, and I swore I would not fail. And we started on at the streak of dawn, but he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee. Before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried, horror-driven, with a corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was lashed to the sleigh, but it seemed to say, "You may tax your brawn and brains, but you promised true, and it's up to you to cremate these last remains." Well, a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. And in the days to come, though my lips were dumb in my heart, how I cursed that load. In the long, long nights by the lone firelight, while the huskies round in a ring, howl out their woes to the homeless snows. How I loathe that thing. And every day that quiet clay seemed to heavy and heavier grow. Yet on I went, though my dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not fail. And I'd often sing to the homeless thing, and it hearkened with a grin. Till I came to the marge of Lake LaBarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw in a trice it was called Alice May. And I looked at it, then I thought of it, and I looked at my frozen chum, and here, said I with a sudden cry, it's my crematorium. Now some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was lying around, I heaped the fuel higher. The flames just soared and the furnace roared, and hoo-hoo, such a blaze you seldom see. Then I burrowed a hole in that glowing coal, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I took a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so, and the heavens scowled and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I don't know why. And the greasy smoke in his inky cloak went streaming down the sky. Now I do not know how long in the snow I wrestled in grisly fear, but But the stars came out, and they danced about, and again I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, I'll just take a peep inside, for I guess he's cooked. It was time I looked. Then the door opened wide, and there sat Sam, looking cool and calm, and the heart of the furnace roar. He wore a smile, you could see him on. He said, oh, please, close that door. For it's fine in here, but I greatly fear you let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plumtree back in Tennessee, this is the first time I've been warm. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who moil for gold. The Arctic trails got their secret tales that'd make your blood run cold. The northern lights, they've seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was that night on the marge at Lake Labarge when I cremated Sam McGee. Now this story, this next one, comes from a place a little closer to you guys. This is a Michigan story, a Leelanau story, and it's called The Red-Headed Woodpecker. Once, long, long ago, when, after Gumi had created the world, there was a person named Manubeshu. Now, Manubeshu was half man and half spirit. And he did not always like to live with the people because they did not always understand him because he was half man and half spirit. So he spent a great deal of time by himself, alone in the woods. Well, once, after a particularly long and cold winter, Manubeshu got tired of being alone, and he wanted to be with some people. So he strapped on his snowshoes, and he started trudging through the forest. And he came to a little cabin, and he realized when he got there that he was cold and hungry. So he thought he would knock on the door and ask for some food and shelter for a while. But then he thought, I do not want the person who's in here to think that I, Manubeshu, half man, half spirit, has to go begging for bread. So I will call myself Nishnabe. Now Nishnabe is a word that means person. So Manubeshu knocked on the door, and an old woman opened the door. And she had a long nose, and she wore a red scarf on her hair, and a long black robe. And over that robe, she wore a white buckskin apron. And she creaked open the door, and she said, who is it? And Manubeshu said, it is I, Nishnabe. Nishnabe, said the old woman. What kind of name is that? Person? Nishnabe? Oh well, if you want me to call you Nishnabe, I will. What is it you want? And Manubeshu said, I would like some food and shelter, for I'm hungry and cold. Now the old woman looked at Manubeshu and saw that he was strong and handsome. But then she thought for herself, even though he's strong enough to work for his food, I suppose if I were hiking through the woods alone and were cold and hungry, that I would want someone to give me food. So she looked at Manubeshu and she said, you will have to wait a minute, for first I have to build a fire, and then I will bake you some bread. Now, the way this old woman baked her bread was, she had a little stone oven, 2 stones up the side and 1 over the top. And she would build a fire in there. And after the fire got heated up and there were enough coals, she would scrape out the fire and put the bread in, and the warmth from that fire on those rocks would bake the bread evenly. And while the fire was burning, she went over to her food bin and she scooped up 1 handful of corn and she put it in a bowl. And then she scooped up 1 handful of sweet acorn meats and put that also in the bowl. And she ground that up real good and real fine into flour. And then she would reach into the fire, and she always kept a deer bone in the fire. She reached into that and she broke off a piece about the size of your thumbnail. Now, before people had yeast, they would mix up a little bit of bone in their bread because it's got calcium carbonate in it, like bicarbonate soda, like baking soda. That would help the bread to rise. And she took that deer bone, she also ground that up really good. And put that in with the other flour. Then she took a handful of water and kneaded a loaf of bread. And by the time she had the bread all kneaded, that fire was just about right. And she took a stick and she scraped out all the ashes. And she set that loaf of bread in her oven to bake. Now, she was such a good baker, and it was such a good oven, that she could normally get 2 loaves out of one fire. Well, while all this was going on, Manubeshu was still outside, stomping around in the snow. And he walked over to a giant oak tree that was in the forest, spreading his arms out. And he lifted his arms toward the sky. And Manubeshu said, "O great spirits of the forest, I want you to bless this old woman for giving me food and shelter. And I want you to make the bread twice as big as it would normally be." Well, when the old woman went to get the bread out of the oven, she saw that her loaf of bread was twice as big as it should have been. And she thought to herself, "No, I am a good baker, and I have been baking for many, many years. Something must be wrong with this bread. I will have to do it again." So she opened the door, and she said, "Nishnabe, Nishnabe." And Manubeshu walked over and said, "Yes, old woman?" She said, "Nishnabe, I'm sorry, something is wrong with my bread. You will have to wait while I make another loaf." Manubeshu shook his head and stood outside, and she shut the door. And this time she went over to her food pantry, and she grabbed only half a handful of corn and half a handful of acorns. And about half as much deer bone and about half a scoop of water. She ground it all up and mixed it up and kneaded it all together. And she put that into her still warm oven. Manubeshu, still outside, once again walked over to the great oak tree and said, "O great spirits of the forest, I want you to bless this old woman for giving me food and shelter, and make the bread twice as big as it was before." Now imagine the woman's surprise when she reached in her oven to pull out the bread that she had made using only half the ingredients, to find it twice as big as the first loaf. And then the woman got greedy. She thought to herself, "Who is this outside of my door? Why can he not work to earn his own bread? Why should I, a poor old woman, give him my bread? I'm going to make another loaf for him and keep these loaves for me." And she opened the door and she stuck out her long nose and her red head, and she said, "Nishnabe, Nishnabe, I am sorry, Nishnabe, but again something has gone wrong with my bread, and you will have to wait while I reheat my oven and make more bread." Nishnabe nodded his head and said, "As you wish, old woman." Well, this happened 7 times. Each time the woman would use half as many ingredients as before, and each time Manubeshu would go out and pray to the spirits of the forest, and each time the bread would be twice as big as it was before. Until finally, the old woman took 1 kernel of corn and pulled out the smallest of her acorns and ground those up. And she took just a bit of deer bone and just a drop of water, and she made the tiniest little loaf you ever did see. And she put that in her oven. And Manubeshu went out to the great oak tree and said, "O great spirits of the forest, bless this old woman and make the bread twice as big as before." And when the woman went to take that small loaf of bread out of her oven, it was so big that it had filled her entire oven. And she could barely get it out. And she walked over to the door and she opened it. She stuck that long nose of hers out. And once again she said, "Nishnabe, Nishnabe, I am sorry, Nishnabe, but once again something has gone wrong with my bread, and I will have to bake you another loaf." And now Manubeshu was angry and said, "Old woman, do you not know that it is I, Manubeshu, who's been outside your door all this time waiting? Do Do you not know that it is I who have been praying to the spirits of the forest to make your bread twice as big as before? But you have been so greedy as to keep it for yourself. And now, old woman, from now on you will have to peck and scrape for any food that you will ever get. And while Manubeshu said that old woman's nose grew longer and longer and longer. And her red scarf turned into red feathers on her head. And she went to slam the door, but her arms and her black robe turned into wings. And her white buckskin apron turned into soft, downy feathers. And the old woman went squawk! And she flew out the door. She perched on the side of that great oak tree. And she was the first red-headed woodpecker. And from that day on, red-headed woodpeckers and all woodpeckers have had to peck and scrape for the little bit of food that they can find under the barks of trees. All because that old woman was greedy. This next set of stories I have for you are just some fun tales that I picked up along the way. This first one is about my grandpa. My grandpa was Jacob Bushman. And your grandpa was Jacob Bushman Jr. Now my grandpa had a number of sons, of which my dad, Jacob Bushman Jr., was one of them. And they would work on the farm there in Coopersville in the summertime. And they would cut the hay with these big, they called them scythes or sickles. And they had a long handle and a big blade out on the end of it, a curve. And they would swing those scythes and they'd cut that grass down real good, and then they'd gather it up and put it in big mounds, and then the wagon would come and they'd pitchfork it out to the wagon. And that's how they'd get it in the barn for the winter time. Now my grandpa had a hunting dog. His name was Old Blue. Now, Old Blue was the best hunting dog you ever did see. He could chase up birds and rabbits. And he loved to chase rabbits because he could get them going, and rabbits, as you know, when they're being chased, will always run in a circle and come back to you. And Grandpa would just sit there and wait, and they'd have rabbit stew for dinner. Well, Old Blue, and once he got on the trail of something, he just wouldn't let up for nothing. And that's all he had on his mind, was catching that game. Well, one day, all the boys were working in the field with Grandpa. And they were cutting the hay, and it was lunchtime. And they had all set their sickles down in the tall grass, and they sat down to eat. Well, Old Blue kicked up a rabbit. And he was howling, howling, boo, boo, boo. And he was chasing that rabbit around. And my uncles didn't think anything of that. And suddenly Old Blue started coming back toward him. And they noticed that he was running directly for one of those scythes that was in the grass with the blade sticking up. And they tried to stop him. Blue, Blue, wait, stop! But they couldn't. Old Blue's mind was just on getting that rabbit. And he hit that sickle right square in the nose. And you know what happened? It split that old dog right in half. Well, Grandpa ran over there, and he took Old Blue and he slapped them back together. And he grabbed his work shirt and he wrapped him up really, really tight. And boy, he was scared. He didn't know if Old Blue was going to live or die. And he took that old dog, and he could hear him whimpering in there, so he knew he was still alive. He took that old dog home, and he got some of Grandma's ointments, and he put it on Old Blue. Just didn't dare unwrap him, because he didn't know what would happen if he did that. And he left him in that blanket, and he set him down next to the wood stove for 3 days. Well, at the end of the third day, Grandpa said, I got to see how Old Blue's doing. And he slowly unwrapped his shirt. And there was Old Blue. He was alive. But Grandpa, in his hurry to slap Old Blue back together, had mixed up the halves and turned one half upside down. So that Old Blue now had 2 legs sticking down and 2 legs sticking straight up in the air. And he had a head on either end and a tail on either end. But you know what? Old Blue was twice as good a hunting dog from then on. Because he could smell game coming or going. And he could get running after that game. And just to howl, and he'd be running on those two legs. And when he got tired, all he had to do was flip over on those two spare legs he had, and he could chase that game right down. He was a funny looking dog, but Old Blue was the best hunting dog in the county. Now, there once was a tailor, and he loved to make fine things for people, kind of like your Aunt Jill does. This tailor was always making clothes and garments for kings and queens. And one day, he got a hankering to make something for himself. So he went out and bought this fine material. And he cut up that material, and he made himself a great looking coat. It came down, it had big cuffs on the sleeves and a long tail down the back. Oh, that tailor loved that coat. He wore that coat every day and everywhere he went. Summer, winter, spring, fall, you name it, that tailor was in that coat. Why, he wore that coat so much that he plumb wore it out. And that tailor looked at that old worn out jacket and said, oh, that was a great coat. Then he looked at it again. And he said to himself, you know, I think there's just enough material left to make for myself a shirt. So he took out all the stitching from that jacket. Sure enough, there was just enough material left to make for himself a shirt. Oh, that was a great looking shirt. He wore that shirt everywhere. He'd love to put that shirt on in the morning and just look at himself. He'd love to feel that material on his skin. He wore that shirt. That was a super shirt that he wore. He wore that shirt every day until it plumb wore out. The tailor scratched his head. You know, first I had this great looking jacket. And then I had this super shirt. And now I just don't know what I'll do. And he looked at that old worn out shirt again. He says, you know, I think there's just enough material left in there to make for myself a vest. So he took apart all the old stitches, and sure enough, there was just enough material left in that shirt to make for himself a vest. And that was a mighty fine vest. He had a couple little pockets here for his watch to put on. That tailor wore that vest everywhere. He became known as the tailor who wore the vest. And he wore that vest to church on Sunday mornings, and he wore it to work on Monday afternoons. And he wore that vest so much and every day that he just plumb wore it out. And he looked at it, that old worn out vest, and he says, first I had that great coat, then I had that super shirt, and then I had this fine looking vest, and now I just don't know what I'll do. And he scratched his head and said, you know what? I think there's just enough material left in that vest to make for myself a tie. So he did. He took out all the old stitches, and sure enough, there was just enough material left to make for himself a nice bow tie. Oh, he loved that tie. He looked good in a tie, too. That tailor wore that tie. He even wore that tie to bed. He loved that tie so much. He was always in that tie. Well, he wore that tie so much and every day that one day it just wore out. And the tailor looked at that sad old worn out old tie and said, oh, first I had that great coat, and then I had that super shirt, and then I had that fine looking vest. Then I had this here old neat tie, and now I just don't know what I'll do. And he looked at that tie again and says, you know what? I think there's just enough material left in that tie to make for myself a button